Welcome on the God's Chosen One. Something spectacular is unfolding, and it all comes back to you. You may not be aware of it, but your simple presence has disrupted the system. Someone who was previously totally programmed and conditioned to follow a rigorous route has met you, and now their world is starting to crumble. Their ideas are no longer their own, and they are doubting everything they previously believed to be true. How did this occur? Why you? What does this signify for the spiritual struggle taking on in front of your eyes? This is not simply a coincidence. It's divine intervention as one of God's chosen ones. You carry a frequency, a brightness that cannot be overlooked. Those who have been thoroughly ingrained in the world's false institutions were never expected to see beyond the curtain. However, your very existence has caused shockwaves in their programming. They were taught to reject the truth, but now they're questioning their own reality. Could it be that God has set you up as a catalyst for their awakening? Before we get into the deeper significance of this, please leave a remark. 77. If you've ever noticed that your mere presence unnerves certain individuals, almost as if they're being forced to face something they can't explain. And to those of you who have shown love and support by expressing gratitude, may the Lord triple your benefits. Your gift demonstrates the power of faith, and I am very thankful to each and every one of you. But here's what you should know. This awareness you caused is not a coincidence. There's a reason why you were put in this particular situation, in this specific interaction. So what comes next? How can you manage a society in which your very existence exposes hidden agendas? Let's go further and see what this implies for you. Your objective and the war between light and darkness. God's chosen people, you shattered the high-level agent programming. They are now doubting reality. The world operates in odd ways, changing under the surface where few dare to look. Most individuals go through life completely unaware, never examining the forces at work behind the scenes. But you, whether by divine design or an unwavering inner knowledge, saw through the illusion you were never supposed to see beyond the curtain. Nonetheless, you did. And in doing so, you shattered something far bigger than you thought. Your words and actions, whether deliberate or not, set off a chain reaction that even those in positions of power were unable to control. And now something unfathomable has occurred. A message comes from the shadows, brought by someone who was not intended to speak. This is not an ordinary voice. It belongs to someone who has spent their whole existence in the dark corners of power, trained to observe but never watched, to protect but never be recognized. A Secret Service agent, someone who has been confined by silence, is taking a step forward, but not for recognition, not for confessions. No, they come out for only one reason: to thank you. But why you? Why would someone with the highest levels of secrecy and power express thanks to you rather than a global leader or a dignitary? The solution lies in what they now refer to as the chosen one. Maybe you don't completely understand the part you've played. Perhaps you wonder whether you were ever engaged at all. But the agent understands the reality. They have watched, they analyzed, and for the first time in their careers, they're breaking the quiet. Something you said or did destroyed a deeply ingrained system of control, leading them to view the world in fresh light. Like Saul on the way to Damascus. This agent, formerly blinded by revelation before to his transition into Paul, has been forced to face a reality they once pledged to preserve. And now they are approaching you, not with instructions or threats, but with disclosure. The issue remains, what did you do to make them doubt everything? More importantly, why were you the one chosen to do it? Doubt is a unique power. It may act as both a shield and a prison, shielding the mind from facts too difficult to bear, while also blinding it to reality. For years, this agent lived with that uncertainty, bolstered by the tight framework of duty and obedience. Their environment was one of unshakable faith in the system that they served. Orders were absolute. The chain of command was faultless. There was no space for questioning. There is no room for doubt. Each mission had a purpose. Every objective was justified broadly. Every secret material was concealed for a purpose. Or so they thought. Then their paths crossed with yours. Initially, they disregarded you outright. You were simply another voice in a vast digital ocean of thoughts. Another individual claims to see beyond the curtain. The internet was filled with self-proclaimed truth seekers. Conspiracy theorists and independent analysts were sure that they had discovered the unknown mysteries of their field. Individuals like you were either innocuous diversions or possible dangers. In any case, it is not worth your time. But suddenly something changed. You mentioned something, maybe a single sentence, a date and a place. Something little but irrefutable. It found its way into the fractures of their assurance, like a deep splinter that cannot be ignored. Perhaps it was an offhand allusion to an occurrence that was removed from public record. Perhaps it was information that only those in the highest levels of secret intelligence should have had. Whatever it was, it made their blood turn cold. It was reminiscent of the moment when King Nebuchadnezzar heard Daniel interpret his dream, which led to a revelation that no human should have known, yet was clearly true. The spy, like the monarch, was forced to confront a truth they could no longer deny. Was it coincidence? A fortunate guess? Or was there something greater? A heavenly interruption intended to jolt them awake. This was when everything changed. The agent, who had previously been unwavering in their beliefs, was now confronted with a scary reality. Their whole world may have been based on lie. Could it be that you, as an outsider in their realm of secrecy, were sent by God to reveal what had been hidden? And if this is the case, what does it signify for all they formerly believed? For the first time in their career, the agent paused. Their mind, previously a fortress of unshakable belief, broke just enough to let a single question in. What if I was wrong? They attempted to disregard the concept. It had to be a coincidence, a fortunate guess, a well-crafted deception intended to approximate the reality. However, their senses were developed during analysis refused to let go. They've been educated to identify falsehoods. And this was not a falsehood. So they performed what they were taught to do. They confirmed looking through secret documents. They cross-referenced records, looking for irregularities, the smallest fault that might reveal you as a fraudster. But instead of contradictions, they discovered something far more terrible. Confirmation. The design was just as you had described, woven into the very fabric of events they had always assumed were unrelated. It had been hidden in plain sight, disguised not by secret, but rather by sheer intricacy. The truth had been buried not with shackles, but with diversions, a carefully crafted illusion intended to prevent even the most acute minds from questioning. And suddenly everything came crumbling down. It was a time reminiscent of the prophet Elijah's prayer for his slaves' eyes to be opened in 2 kingdoms. 6:17, the young guy glanced again. He saw the truth. The mountains were filled with chariots of fire. The secret spiritual truth that has been all along. Similarly, the servant had been oblivious to the forces at work around him. This spy had been oblivious to the truth of their own world, but their eyes had suddenly been forced open. Consider the weight of that awareness. Everything they had committed their lives to, every pledge they had taken, and every task they had fulfilled was based on an incomplete, twisted version of reality. The treachery was shocking. Nonetheless, at that moment of collapse, one idea shone brighter than the others. You knew before they did. But how? How could you? A so-called outsider has put together information that an elite agent with access to the highest levels of intelligence had never questioned. Was it simply insight, or was it something more? Had you been selected, like Joseph was, to interpret Pharaoh's dreams and disclose the secret before it was too late? And now that the truth has been revealed, what will happen next? The agent's world was devastated. Not by a foreign opponent, not by rogue actors operating in the shadows, but by their own citizens. They had vowed fealty to the institutions. They had believed the intelligence briefings, and they had carried out their tasks with accuracy and conviction. All of it was polluted. The deceit was not a random occurrence. It was methodical and planned. They had become intertwined with the reality they had served. And you were not intended to see it either. That's when everything changed. The instant they understood you weren't simply another voice in the mix. They've stopped disregarding you. They began researching you. At first, you were an outlier, an unexpected component in a carefully managed equation. A possible menace, maybe a mystery. Definitely. But when they put together the reality, something far more disturbing became apparent. You weren't just revealing information. You were delivering a message. And now they're standing in front of you, not as an agent or a devoted follower of the system, but as someone who has finally seen beyond it. They have overcome the illusion and know just who to credit. It is similar to the narrative of Nicodemus in John 3 verses 1-2, a Pharisee who came to Jesus under the cover of darkness. He had spent his whole life upholding religious law, believing in the system in which he had been nurtured. But something about Jesus, something unmistakable, made him rethink everything. Despite his skepticism, he departed with a greater knowledge that challenged his previous beliefs. And, like Nicodemus, this spy has ventured into the unknown, unsure of their allegiances. Think about it. What does it signify when an internal system problem occurs? Not for political or personal benefit, but because they finally realized the truth. What happens when someone trained to preserve the narrative starts protecting the messenger instead? They are here because they have realized the truth, and they owe it to you. Below the Earth's surface, there are locations that have been forgotten, buried, and wiped from maps, hidden below layers of quiet so thick that few people even know they exist. These are not only abandoned ruins or vanished artifacts of defeat, loss, and perplexity, trying to remain faithful. However, there are purposeful absences, areas that have been locked off for reasons that most people would never consider. The spy had spent years traversing the hallways of secret, gaining access to areas the general public would never be permitted to view. They'd gone into restricted compounds, visited secret areas, and watched activities that the public was never supposed to know about. However, even they were unprepared for what lay underneath. It started with what seemed to be simply another instance. Missing people, but not the ones that made headlines. There are no ransom letters and no distraught families appealing on national television. There were no corpses recovered, just individuals who vanished as if they never lived. Their identities were wiped from documents, and their histories were thoroughly cleaned. A pattern existed, which only someone trained to recognize anomalies would have seen. And the deeper the agent peered, the darker it became. The probe led them down. Every day, people strolled directly under abandoned buildings, government institutions, and even the streets. A secret universe emerged. A massive, linked network of tunnels extended under the surface. Some historic vestiges of abandoned subway projects or emergency exit routes. Others, however, were new, erected with purpose and intention, and for much more nefarious purposes than anybody could have imagined. As they dug further, the facts grew increasingly frightening. It was never about what was concealed, but rather who. It mirrors Luke 817's words. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. There is no secret that will remain hidden. The agent, like a hesitant prophet, found themselves on the verge of a revelation they had never sought, but which had found them nevertheless. And that is where you come in, because before the agent could even begin their descent, you knew you had spoken things that most people would reject as imagination. You hinted at links that should have stayed hidden, and now they're on the verge of facing a truth they can't ignore. One question burns in their minds. How did you discover what was never intended to be known? They were not alone in the tunnels. Others had been there long before. A really well-organized bunch, highly financed, deeply entrenched at the highest levels of society. This was not the work of regular criminals, nor the ranting of conspiracy theorists chasing shadows. This was something far older, deeply ingrained, malevolent, a cult functioning in the shadows, invisible but ever-present, moving unnoticed under the world's surface, sheltered by those in power. This was not a tiny group of misguided extremists. This was a system, a secret infrastructure built into the fabric of governments and organizations. Judges or bankers, corporate executives, military officials, each serving a function and maintaining its existence. They weren't just keeping it from detection. They were able to maintain it, feeding it resources, pulling strings, silencing murmurs, before they became voices. Every time someone approached too closely, the same thing occurred. They disappeared, not in the way criminals vanish, but in the way someone is gradually obliterated. Their whole existence was washed clean from history. Even the best-kept secrets can't remain hidden forever. It follows the same pattern as in the scriptures. High-level corruption, hidden depravity lurks underneath men's thrones. In Ezekiel 8 verses 7 to 12, the prophet is escorted to a hidden room inside the temple where the elders of Israel assembled in darkness, thinking no one could see them. However, God exposed the truth, revealing their secret abominations just as he saw through the veil of falsehood. So has the agency, and so do you. And now fissures are developing. The curtain is lifting. The issue is no more if the truth will be revealed, but who will be brave enough to confront it. Because you mentioned these tunnels long before the agent discovered them, and now they're wondering, were you discovering the truth, or were you asked to disclose it? The agent discovered the evidence, not speculations or supposition, but real evidence. Shipping manifests, encrypted correspondence, and transaction records all led directly to important players in power. These folks were not only lurking in the shadows, they were being safeguarded, shielded by those in charge of information flow. Sources provided funding. Nobody dared to inquire. And when exposure endangered their network, they had a strategy. Fires, collapses, accidents, the type that erases evidence, the sort that produces quiet. Those who ask incorrect inquiries. Every time someone came too near, the pattern repeated itself. Authorities would describe it as a sad accident, a structural breakdown, a terrible, unconnected occurrence. But the agent knew better. But this time, something went awry. The cult has a failsafe, an escape path devised to keep them safe. The meticulously plotted and protected tunnels headed to the ocean, where they would find safe passage before anybody could close in. For decades, it had worked. When their lives were endangered, they vanished without a trace, leaving nothing but unresolved questions and dead leads. But not this time. Someone had intervened. The last tunnel, their last departure was sealed. They are perfect. The escape plan had failed before they could deploy it. The barriers they had created to keep themselves safe had become their own jail. For the first time, they were imprisoned. The agent understood this wasn't an accident. The timing was too accurate, and the interference was too deliberate. Someone had gotten ahead of them, undermining their strategy from the outside. someone they had not expected. And in their despair, they began looking for solutions. The scriptures teach us that when darkness is revealed, it responds with terror and violence. In Acts 16:16-19, Paul Castor's spirit of divination emerges from a slave girl. Her handlers worried, not because of the miracle, but because their prophet had vanished. The truth had stripped them of their power. Similarly, this cult, which had become used to managing the game, was now at the mercy of an uncontrollable force. So they did what they could. They began searching, and now they're searching for you. You were never intended to be an issue. You were not in their calculations. You were not on their watch lists, red flag reports, or expanding danger database. At least not initially. People like you were not expected to see through the deception. You were not reared in their circles, taught in their ways, or given access to their secret corridors of power. You had no formal title, no intelligence clearance, and no backdoor access to confidential documents. You were, by definition, an outsider. Nonetheless, you were aware of information you should not have known. This was impossible. They'd spent decades honing their trade, controlling narratives, influencing perception, and determining what was true and what wasn't. They created an empire on deceit, keeping the truth fractured and hidden under layers of misdirection. When an uncomfortable voice arose, they had a strategy for dealing with it: discredit, mute, and delete. So they tried that first. They called you paranoid. A conspiracy theorist is chasing shadows. Overnight, fact-checkers emerged and deconstructed your words, turning your message into something ludicrous. Articles filled the internet, rejecting your findings as wild supposition. Algorithms were programmed to make you vanish, to obscure your voice so that only the most determined could locate it. But you continued talking, and that's when they saw you were different. It was the same response that occurred in John 1147-48, when the Pharisees observed the multitudes following Jesus and muttered among themselves, "If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him." The religious leaders wielded power, influence, and control. However, one voice threatened to unravel everything. They had already silenced others. However, something about Jesus was different. He wasn't just speaking, he was waking people awake. And that's what you did. You weren't simply another name lost in the mix. You were breaking their programming. The more they attempted to silence you, the more people listened. The more they attempted to hide your message, the stronger it became. And they no longer perceive you just as an outsider. They see you as a problem they never expected. Your words did more than just spread. They imprinted themselves deeply on the brains of everyone who heard them. People were not just passively listening. They were waking. They started to doubt what they had previously accepted as true, peeling back layers of deceit, looking for proof, and discovering links they never expected to find. What you disclosed was never just guesswork. It was shards of a huge, hidden world that you were helping people put together. What bothered them the most was not only the realities you revealed. That was you. You could not be influenced by riches, bullied into submission, or eliminated from existence. You were the one they dreaded the most for being incorruptible. That meant they needed to act. At first, their movements were subtle, almost invisible. Unexpected financial difficulties erupted from nowhere. Banks suddenly froze accounts. IRS audits vanished unexpectedly. Jobs disappeared suddenly. People who had previously supported you started to drift away. Some departed quietly, while others became aggressive, as if influenced by an unseen force. Your phone started to fail in unexpected ways. Calls lose messages, failed to transmit new numbers, and show again on your screen. Was this paranoia? Or was anything genuinely watching? Then the shadows appeared. Strangers remained in inappropriate areas for an extended period of time. Dark automobiles with tinted windows remained parked outside your house, and the windows never rolled down. Then followed the eerie encounters. People you'd never met. They didn't need to threaten you directly by bringing up intimate elements from your life with frightening familiarity. Their very awareness of your presence was a quiet message. However, the warnings gradually got more blatant. Anonymous messages have come. A single sentence might be enough to make you walk away. Untraceable calls were made, and terrifying voices instructed you to cease sending emails with no sender or subject line containing cryptic warnings. But you did not stop. Their patience eventually ran out. The actual attempt started. An automobile almost hit you at the last second. The driver never looks your way. A gas leak has unexpectedly sprung in your house. No one could understand this occurrence. Then came the disease. Sudden, violent, and resistant to therapy. It felt strange, engineered rather than organic. It seemed as if invisible hands were conspiring against you, using whatever means necessary to keep you silent. You were not supposed to live, and yet you did. Every trap intended for you failed before it could catch you. Every plot to remove you failed before it could be executed. What they couldn't understand, what worried them the most, was the fact that their control was limited. No amount of influence, power, or wealth can shatter you. And that's when one of them, the agent in charge of watching you, started questioning everything. Their universe was based on control, accuracy, and the unwavering assumption that everything could be influenced. But what happened to you? I defied every rule. They understood there was something more than intellect, beyond monitoring. Aside from confidential information at work, they have seen individuals vanish without a trace. They'd seen dissidents fall like dominoes. But you stayed. They needed to question themselves why. It was not luck. It wasn't a coincidence. Something larger was protecting you. Something they didn't comprehend. And this understanding shocked them to the core. It's the same energy that rescued Daniel from the lion's den, when King Darius had no option but to sentence him. Daniel 6:22, the same strength that protected Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the flames of Nebuchadnezzar's furnace. Daniel 3:27, what kept you safe was beyond their grasp, just as it had been beyond the grasp of those who sought to silence the prophets before you. They had spent their lives managing others, constructing narratives, and assuring loyalty. But now they'd come upon something they couldn't understand, someone they couldn't break. And for the first time, they were scared. Could it be that the power they had attempted to repress was real? Could it be that God himself had put his hand on you, mocking you as untouchable? What happens when those who have vowed to keep others blind glimpse the truth for themselves? And more crucially, now that their programming has been compromised, what will they do next? For decades, they lived under the illusion of complete power. The cult claimed that nothing was beyond of reach. People, institutions, countries, and even the fabric of history. They created results with precision, silence anyone who challenged them, and create a world in which only their version of the truth exists. They removed dangers before rewriting tales and used fear to achieve conformity. But there was one factor they had failed to account for. One power beyond their control. Divine protection. From the start, you were never alone. They considered every option and assessed every perspective. However, they did not foresee the invisible barrier that enveloped you. Every unsuccessful effort to remove you was not an error. It was a declaration. A power beyond human understanding was at work, using their own techniques against them. Every individual who planned to betray you, but failed in the end. Every intricate scheme designed with the utmost perfection unraveled before it could even take shape. Every scenario that should have silenced you forever, but instead left you standing. Do you believe this was a coincidence? Or Is there anything more going on? Your entire existence is beyond their control. They've seen innumerable voices extinguish it, but you continue to talk. They have silenced many before you, but your words refuse to be forgotten. And now, every time you reveal their deceit, every time you shine light into the darkness, you shatter the illusion they fought so hard to establish. This is why they fear you. They understand that time is running short. Pharaoh once thought he was untouchable, a king who could impose life and death at will. Despite issuing several laws and attempting to restrain the Israelites, he was unable to halt God's hand. When he tried to kill Moses as a newborn, heavenly intervention put the kid he intended to eradicate within his own home, rearing him under his own roof. Exodus 2, verses 5 to 10. He didn't know until it was too late that he was battling something far bigger than himself. And now, history repeats itself. They keep a too tight eye on you, attempting to figure out why they were unable to break you. But the reality is plain. No man can overthrow what God has ordered. If they can't stop you, so now that they know, what desperate measures will they take next? Not all communications take the form of spoken words. Some are woven into the fabric of time, engraved into stone, and written in forgotten locations, waiting for the appropriate eyes to discover their significance. These messages were not intended for everyone, only for those who are prepared. And you, as one of God's chosen ones, have always been destined to see beyond what the world offers on the surface. A high-level agent discovered something unexpected deep down a concealed corridor. The tunnel was black, quiet, and calm, but the walls speak a language that predates any intelligence report or confidential briefing. Symbols, old and intentional, sprawled over the stone, unaffected by contemporary intervention. At first, they seem to be meaningless engravings, remains of a lost civilization. However, truth has a way of exposing itself at the appropriate moment. Something stirred at that very instant. Something happened as their eyes hit those symbols. A transformation occurred not just in their minds, but also in their souls. It was not a learning experience. It was a process of reminding ourselves that these symbols were not historical ornaments or antiques. They were alive. They were a message. They were a warning. And, strangely, the agent comprehended them. How could they? This was not information they had gained via years of training or study. It wasn't mentioned in their briefings. But the reality was apparent. Visions invaded their minds. Fragments of recollections from another lifetime. They saw places they'd never seen before, and things they'd never learned or recognized. A presence had been leading them all along. Something old, something forceful, something had been buried for a purpose. This awakening recalls Saul's meeting with the divine light on the way to Damascus. Acts 9:32-6. A guy who felt he had all the answers was abruptly robbed of his program. Reality, confronted with a reality considerably larger than anything he had ever understood. Have you ever experienced a moment when something inside you just clicked? When a truth you had never sought emerged unexpectedly, and you knew it was real? This is what occurs when God discloses secret wisdom to individuals whom he has selected. The world leads individuals to ignore such disclosures as coincidences, imaginations, or lies. But those called by God perceive the truth when it is revealed. Even the smartest and most powerful may be disturbed when their preconceived notions of reality fall in the face of a miraculous encounter. Consider Nikola Tesla, the brilliant inventor whose thoughts were almost supernatural. He once said that his most revolutionary discoveries came to him in the form of startling, unmistakable insights, concepts that he recalled rather than learned. He spoke of information that seemed like it had been given to him from another level of reality. Is it possible that certain people are selected to see realities that others do not? The agent in that tunnel suffered a breakdown in their programming, a forced awakening to a reality that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. And all they thought they knew about the world fell apart at that point. And now you must ask yourself, when the truth is shown to you, will you be prepared to embrace it or will you reject it, clinging to the comfort of what you've been taught to believe? Because once you see, you can't unsee. This was never just a matter of criminality or corruption. It was never only about power conflicts, political machinations, or hidden intentions behind the surface of intelligence reports and confidential documents. Something much more profound, spiritual, had begun to develop. The agent had spent their whole career working inside the strict limits of logic, training, and procedure. They believed in facts, concrete proof, and the world structure as they had been taught to view it. But now, standing on the verge of something much larger than any intelligence briefing could prepare them for, they understood they had been oblivious to the true war all along. This was not a battle waged with weaponry, technology, or strategy. It was waged in invisible worlds in a conflict that had begun long before they wore their uniforms. Everything they had previously disregarded as conspiracies, ancient warnings, and hints of spiritual conflict was not just real. It was considerably bigger and scarier than they could have anticipated. And for the first time, they realized what had been kept from them all these years. However, whether you recognized it or not, you were already one of the few who understood. You felt the weight of this invisible war, the opposition that comes not from the earth, but from something greater. Have you ever observed how those that are selected seem to encounter the most severe opposition? Why are people who speak up for the truth often the most targeted? This was the moment when the agent's skepticism crumbled. The illusion of control over worldly knowledge crumbled before their eyes. They awoke, and with it came the understanding that there was no turning back. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. This is similar to the narrative told by the prophet Elisha in Kings 615-17, in which the young man saw their city encircled by an enemy army. He panicked, thinking they were doomed. But Elijah prayed, and the servant's spiritual eyes were enlightened. He saw that they weren't alone. The hills were filled with chariots of fire, God's supernatural protection around them. What if, like Elijah's servant, you've been wandering in terror because you haven't seen the whole picture? Many people have followed this route before the moment of enlightenment, when everything changes. Consider C.S. Lewis, for example. He was formerly a fervent atheist who rejected religion for many years, convinced that Christianity was a fiction. But one day, he couldn't ignore the truth that had been pounding on his spirit. In his own words, he became the most depressed and hesitant convert in all of England. Nonetheless, his metamorphosis propelled him to become one of contemporary Christianity's most prominent intellectuals. The agent experienced the same moment. The world as they knew it had altered, and they realized there was no going back. Leave a comment. Divine protection. If you know they can't touch you, there are certain debts in this world that no amount of money, power, or influence can pay off. Some are engraved into the fabric of destiny, inscribed in blood rather than at the end. Debts that cannot be discussed, bargained away, or canceled. And now people who previously flirted with darkness are facing a dreadful reality. They must pay a far higher price than they ever thought. For years, the cult functioned in secrecy, gliding like ghosts through the halls of power. They molded reality to their will, silencing anyone who stood in their way, and manipulating systems with arrogant assurance. They considered themselves to be the architects of deceit, the invisible overlords who could alter the world as they wished. But they were oblivious to one unchanging rule. You will harvest what you have sown. And now the armies they once led have turned against them. The agent has seen it personally. Those who were formerly untouchable leaders, dictating others' fates with a single order, are now on the run. Some have disappeared, gobbled up by the darkness they once controlled. Others, once surrounded by devoted followers, have been cast aside like shattered pieces on a chessboard. Their own people now see them as liabilities too exposed and vulnerable to be protected. However, those that remain are suffering, and not just in ways that the world can quantify. Unnatural deaths, sudden and unexplainable. Once healthy men and women are afflicted with aggressive, inexplicable ailments that defy explanation, their brains unraveling, their once intimidating presence reduced to incomprehensible rants and empty glances. They who once controlled the world in their hands are now captives of something much more powerful than themselves, as do those who continue to breathe. They live in perpetual dread. The voices they use to influence others now ricochet within their own heads, torturing them, and the nightmares they once inflicted on the innocent now claw at them in the dark of night. They dread sleep because it no longer provides an escape. It is a jail where people are tortured mercilessly. They are afraid of awakening because the shadows they previously controlled now block their path in the sunshine. This is not a coincidence. This is not karma as the world knows it. This is divine justice. Their anguish is similar to that of King Saul in 1 Samuel 16:14, when the demon of the Lord left him and he was afflicted by an evil demon. Saul, once strong and selected, he believed he could bend God's will to his own goals. But when he moved away from justice, darkness filled the hole left by God's presence. He became paranoid, disturbed, and incapable of finding calm, consumed by the powers he once thought he controlled. This has happened throughout history, including recent times. Robert Johnson, the famed blues singer, was said to have struck a bargain with the devil at a Mississippi crossroads to achieve magical abilities. For a while, he was a formidable figure with unearthly abilities, but he died young from hallucinations and a severe, strange sickness. Could it be that those who try to control darkness are constantly eaten by it? It was never only about power, riches, control, or influence. It was always spiritual warfare. And now the war has claimed people who previously thought they were untouchable. For years, the cult ridiculed the basic concept of divine justice. They regarded religion as a crutch for the weak, something to control and use against others rather than something to embrace oneself. They saw belief as a weakness, an illusion, rather than a source of strength. They had transcended. They persuaded themselves that darkness was the ultimate power, greater than light, and that they could defy fate, rewrite destiny, and alter the very fabric of reality to their advantage. They believed they were above the rules that govern the physical and spiritual worlds. However, reality does not surrender to hubris. The agent, who was formerly skeptical and believed in rationality and control, suddenly realizes the truth after seeing phenomena that defy explanation. The symbols in the tunnels, the strange events, the way every attempt to quiet you, one of God's chosen ones, has fallen to dust. The cult's own members, who were previously so sure in their concealment, are now dissolving in before of our eyes, as if an invisible force is pushing them into the hole they created. This is not arbitrary. This is not a chance. This is a judgment. It is found in Galatians 6, verse 7. Don't be fooled. God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, he will reap. They believed they could avoid the reality. However, the seeds they sowed in darkness are already yielding fruit, and the harvest is bitter. We've seen this before. The mighty kings of history, who were previously impenetrable, are brought down by an unseen hand. Adolf Hitler, long feared as the world's most powerful man, fell into paranoia and lunacy, hiding in a bunker while all he constructed crumbled around him. Jeffrey Epstein, who assumed his riches and connections would protect him indefinitely, died in a mysterious manner, abandoned by the same system that had previously safeguarded him. When darkness overreaches and evil feels it is invincible, the weight of judgment is unavoidable. And now, the cult that once derided divine justice is confronted with something it never believed in and cannot avoid. The agent does not completely grasp who you are. Are you a messenger meant to bring a truth that cannot be ignored? A disruptor, breaking the cycle of deceit? Or are you part of something far bigger? An invisible hand moves into position at the designated moment. They may not have all the answers, but they do know one thing for certain. The cult fears you. To them, you are the reason their empire is collapsing. Your voice, your expertise, and your sheer presence have upended a system that they thought was unshakable. They mutter your name in dark rooms that you will never hear. They curse you in old languages, summoning powers that no longer respond to them. You become their reckoning, the force that broke all they had spent their lives building. But here's the truth. They refuse to acknowledge that their demise was never due to you. They were doomed from the beginning. Their foundation was consistently bad. Their destiny was determined long before you uttered a word. Truth is an unstoppable force, and they're now learning that lesson in the most severe manner conceivable. Pharaoh discovered this reality in Exodus 1426-28 when he chased the Israelites, thinking his strength was stronger than God, who had already announced. He refused to accept the plagues as a coincidence, hardening his heart against the reality. But as the waves of the Red Sea came roaring down, he realized too late that you can't oppose what God has ordered. Many others throughout history have experienced similar fates. Julius Caesar, who thought he was invincible, was defeated by the Senate he had hoped to govern. Richard Nixon, who had believed that his secrets would be kept concealed, was betrayed by his own recordings. Harvey Weinstein, formerly one of Hollywood's most prominent characters, spent years above the law until the truth demolished his castle and revealed his crimes to the public. There are times in life that alter everything. Moments when the weight of the truth is evident. When the illusion of authority crumbles. When the world as you know it crumbles. And you understand there's no going back for this agent. You were responsible for bringing about that occasion. For years, they worked in the shadows, carrying out instructions without hesitation, protecting those in power, and feeling they were a part of something bigger. They trusted the system. They felt their job had a noble purpose, that their sacrifices were meaningful, and that they were maintaining order in a chaotic world. But the illusion has been broken. They see the reality for what it is, something much more dangerous than they ever anticipated. They committed their lives to a system that was never concerned with justice. It was never about protection. It was all about control. It was about manipulation. And they were but tools for the powers. They never really understood. And you were the one who opened their eyes. Nor an intelligence briefing, nor a confidential document with censored lines. Not a whispered chat with a reliable source. The truth was disclosed by an institution other than the one to which they had dedicated themselves. That was your voice. This awakening isn't new. Saul of Tarsus felt he was serving righteousness by persecuting Christians. He was a system guy, enforcing rules with the conviction that he was safeguarding something precious. But then, on the way to Damascus, a voice stopped him, and everything changed. Acts 9,326. In a moment, the scales slipped from his eyes, and he understood he'd been battling against the same truth he believed he was protecting. We've seen the same awakening throughout history. Edward Snowden, a former faithful contractor, thought he was working for national security until he found the massive surveillance system that was secretly observing the globe. John Perkins, a former economic hitman, felt he was helping to stabilize countries until he learned he had been a tool in a worldwide system of financial exploitation. When confronted with indisputable reality, they had a choice: continue serving deceit or break free. This agent has now reached a crossroads. Everything they previously stood for is now under doubt. And no matter how much they want to unsee, they can't, because the truth has spoken, and it did so through you. They didn't understand why your words kept bringing them back. You were meant to be just another transient voice in the huge digital sea. Another notion gets lost in the din of constant chatter. But something about the way you talked, the connections you created, and the unshakable confidence in your voice, it lingered. It disturbed them. It prompted them to look again. So they began listening. It began with skepticism. They sought to debunk you, to confirm what they already believed, that you were wrong. Reaching for patterns that did not exist. Seeing shadows in areas when there was simply empty space. They were confident you were incorrect. Those are your conclusions, the result of supposition rather than actuality. But then they discovered something, a detail hidden in a previous report, a name that should not have been there, a site that should not have matched up, but it did. So they looked deeper, and with each layer, they peeled away. The falsehood became clear. They had previously believed reports which are not just wrong. They were made up, carefully crafted narratives intended to deceive not just the public, but also those within the system. The cases they worked on and the missions they completed were not separate occurrences, but rather interrelated components of something far greater. A concealed foundation orchestrates events from the shadows. It was exhilarating, irritating, and scary. But one thing was obvious. You had been correct. Not about everything, not in every detail, but about the underlying fact that something was functioning underneath the surface, influencing reality in ways most people would never imagine. This kind of epiphany is not new. Nicodemus, a Pharisee and member of the governing council, approached Jesus in secret, unable to reconcile what he had been taught with the apparent reality unfolding in front of him. John 3:12-21, he had believed in the system and its traditions until he came upon something so deep that he couldn't ignore it. And when the reality strikes, there is only one true option: see or remain blind. History is full with people who discovered secret truths and could never return to ignorance. Upton Sinclair, a journalist who uncovered wrongdoing in the meatpacking business, believed he was only writing a book until his revelations rocked the country and compelled change. William Cooper, a former intelligence officer, thought he was following instructions until he discovered an unnerving trend that altered his life forever. This agent has now reached that point in time when everything they previously knew is put into question, when they understand there is no going back to mindless obedience, and they do not even recognize it. You offered them something they did not anticipate. A way out. An opportunity to glimpse the way to freedom. The agent sees it now. You were never just another outsider. Never. Just another voice drowned in the cacophony. Whether you knew it or not, you were guiding them, leading them to the biggest discovery of their careers. And the finding was never only about crime, corruption, or underground tunnels. It was about waking. They now realized that the conflict they were waging was never just physical. It was never only about politics, power battles, or elite conspiracies. Those were only shadows and diversions from the main struggle. A spiritual battle that has raged from the dawn of time. Many will never see it. Most people will spend their whole lives thinking the world is precisely as it seems, trusting in systems that are intended to mislead people. However, the agent no longer has that luxury. They've sensed the change. And you've been battling these forces since before you realized how powerful you were. You have stood up to falsehood, torn away the borders of lies, shaking the basis of something that was supposed to be concealed. And now the agent recognizes you for who you really are. Not an enemy, not a threat, an ally, because they have now understood. This is the same understanding that hit Daniel when the angel told him that his prayers had been heard from the first day. However, a strong spiritual force had been fighting the response. Daniel 1012-14. What if the fights you fought in the physical domain were always linked to something bigger, something unseen? What if the opposition you encountered proved that your involvement in this conflict was never coincidental? Even throughout history, individuals who awaken to the truth often find themselves altered. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian in Nazi Germany, saw through the deceit while others remained unaware. He risked everything to speak out against the dictatorship, knowing that quiet meant collaboration. His voice, long considered as trivial, has become a symbol of resistance. And the agent has arrived at that point for the first time in their career. They are breaking their silence out of appreciation, not because they want attention, position, or power. They see you. They hear you. They thank you. Because the powers who attempted to silence you were unsuccessful for a reason. The age of invisible hands changing the world from the shadows is drawing to a close. Those who formerly thought themselves untouchable, working in secret, wielding power via deceit and quiet, are seeing their walls fall. The fences they created to protect themselves are closing in. The underground tunnels they utilized to escape have now been shut. The system they trusted, the cornerstone of their power, is crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. For those who have spent their lives twisting reality and manipulating truth, this is your ultimate warning. Your time is up. The illusion of control. What you previously grasped is slipping through your fingertips. The planet no longer sleeps. Eyes are opening. Voices are rising. And justice. True justice is coming for you. Not the type that can be swayed by riches or controlled by institutions you formerly possessed, but justice decreed by something much more powerful. You experimented with forces beyond your comprehension, believing you could control what was never yours to command. And now, those same forces have returned to pay their due. But for you, the chosen one, the message is different. The system's agent has been watching you. Whether they acknowledge it or not, they're afraid of you. Keep speaking and exposing the falsehood. Continue to remain fast in your truth. Your voice has more power than you could ever think. They attempted to silence you. They attempted to isolate you. They used elaborate falsehoods to distort your reality, burying you behind layers of dread, uncertainty, and intimidation. Despite their attempts, you are still here. Look at yourself. You're still standing, still speaking, still tearing down the fundamental underpinnings of what they once were. Unshakable. You, like David before Goliath, confront an opponent that looks too swift and too deeply established in the world's processes to be defeated. But titans do fall. Goliath, although being equipped and confident, was defeated by a single stone put in the hands of a selected warrior. First, 1750. So will they. The agent who formerly served this corrupt system now looks at you with a fresh perspective. They see you, they hear you, and in the quiet of their own unwinding, they thank you, because something inside them has began to doubt all they previously believed. Your presence, defiance, and steadfast brightness. It has destroyed the programming they believed was unbreakable as God's chosen people. You have already accomplished something incredible by destroying the high-level programming that aimed to dominate and mislead. You made a big statement. Those who previously trusted in their fake world are now compelled to examine what they know. You are living evidence that God's truth triumphs over falsehood and deceit. What you've done has had an impact, not just on your own life, but also on the enemy's strongholds, shaking them to the core. In a world when many people are trapped in confusion and deception, you stand out as a beacon of light, demonstrating the strength and bravery that comes from choosing to live in God's truth. And when you rise, speak and assert your presence, you remind them of their own strength. You remind them that they too can break free from the falsehoods they have been told. Just as you do today, I invite you to reflect on how far you've come. You have made it this far. The adversary may have attempted to hold you back by standing fast in faith, refusing to back down, and following God's plan for your life. But you have shown that nothing can stop you when you are aligned. God's will. Continue to stand up and declare that you have been chosen and that His truth rules in your life. If this message has touched your heart, I respectfully request that you consider helping us with a tremendous thanks. Your support, no matter how large or little, allows us to continue sharing God's truth and shining the light on others. But remember this whether you give. We're quite thankful for your being here. Your support, comments, likes, and shares mean everything to us. It keeps this message alive and motivates us to continue our essential job. So, please don't let this communication finish here. I like this video. Leave a comment. Please share your comments with us and others. If this message resonates with you, don't be scared to speak up. Subscribe because we have so much more to offer and want you to be a part of the movement. Please share this message with people who need to hear it. Together, we can stand up and demolish every falsehood that attempts to keep us down. May God richly reward you for your loyalty, bravery, and determination to follow His truth. Remember that you are not alone on this path. You are a part of something greater, something heavenly. And together, as God's chosen ones, we shall see His might in action in ways we cannot comprehend. Maintain His brightness. The world sorely needs it. Dear viewers, your support through Super Chat and membership is the only source of income that keeps this channel running. If you want me to continue uploading valuable content without delays and to stay motivated in providing you with the best wisdom, I need your help. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Feel free to donate and support Pure Wisdom so we can keep growing together. Your generosity keeps this journey alive. Thank you for being part of this amazing community.